We're so happy to have you here, Ute. I think it's so wonderful to have a language expert here to share the experience of not just teaching and sharing your expertise, but also sharing your own language learning stories. You're an intercultural language trainer, you're a consultant, you're a language expert. You've worked in different countries and you have been an expat since birth, and I think that's actually the name of your blog, Expect Since Birth. So we're curious, how did you build up your languages? You know, from such a young age until now, you're sharing your expertise with parents and also language organizations and even cultural organizations. Can you kind of give us a background about your language learning experience?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I'm happy to share a little bit about my journey, my multilingual journey that started from day one. I grew up in Italy with German parents, so I was immediately immersed into two languages from birth. And later on at school, I learned French and English and Latin. And yes, I went to an international school, so I had many friends from many different cultural and linguistic backgrounds. So I was always curious to understand what other people would say. So I learned, maybe in a very strange way, first the swear words, which is very typical for, I think, teenagers then. And I went on from there. I later studied Romanistics, that's languages and literature, Italian and French, but also other Romance languages, also Spanish. And did my PhD in medieval French literature, philology, and became also an assistant at the Department of Romance Linguistics, Historical Linguistics at the department at the University in Zurich, where I taught also historical linguistics. So my passion for languages just went on. And later I studied also Old French, the Languedoc, the Provençal French and the Old French and all kind of dialects, because I was working at the Department of Historical Linguistics, Italian Historical Linguistics. So I just wanted to know more about what languages are spoken, why some languages are not spoken anymore in certain contexts or certain regions of Italy and other countries, and how the languages actually are very similar also sometimes, even if they are not from the same language family, but they have some similarities. And this brought me then further, and well, what I'm doing now is I help international families, multilingual families who speak more than two languages at home on a daily or very regular basis to raise their children as multilingual children, so with all the languages that they need to speak and maybe read and write.
Yes, Dr. Limacher. That's how I should call you, because you are also a researcher. Yes, and then I think today you're here not only, sharing your background with us, but we also have some questions from, our listeners and some parents actually. And at the same time, during your time of learning different languages, because, from the beginning till, you obviously you're very curious about languages. So you want to know more. It's like so much fun. So we want to know more. But let's talk about maybe during the teenage years. I think in one of your writing, you talk about, you probably also experienced some kind of a resistance, for not wanting to maybe speak, the language of your parents, one of your parents' language. You also talk about because you studied in the international school. So can you touch on that a little bit? What was it like for you, and how did you get back to say, well, I still want to keep this heritage language?
Yes, yes, I went to an international school and I was in the German section. So I did all my studies in German. So that was our family language then. but I had quite some resistance. Yes, I think like every teenager has, to some extent, and in some domains of life. So mine was in the language section. So I wanted to belong to the groups that I hang out with that were locals. So they were all speaking Italian mainly. And I didn't want to speak German for a very long time, almost 8 years. And then I worked also in a field, with colleagues. I just spoke only Italian and French during the whole day for several years, and I did research in this area. So my German was really fading away until a certain moment when I said, well, I don't want it to just disappear, because it can be a nice language, but it had also to do a little bit with identity, the identity finding and defining who you are, who your ancestors were. And if you accept that, I mean, with the history of Germany, that was not so very easy for me to accept. And I had always a very critical view on that, and I still have, but I discovered the beauty of this language also through my grandparents, and this was something that I really cherish, and I think it was the turning point when I realized that it is an important language for me and my history, so to say. And as I always have a historical view on everything, so I couldn't deny this. But yes, I had some resistance myself, so I know what it means not to want to respond in that language. And I remember the expression in the face of my mom, who would just try all that she could to make me respond in German, and I would not do so. So.
Wow. I think a lot of parents probably are very impressed to hear this, because I think how you came back to your mother tongue, German, and also, the experience for you, and how, your mother she was trying to help you to get back to the language. I think a lot of parents actually all experience that. And then I think especially when you're talking about the OPOL, the one parent or one person, one language kind of method, a lot of times, one parent would be speaking the community language and another parent will be speaking the minority language. And then I think the person who is doing the minority language probably has the most challenge. And does it apply to what your practice when you're helping parents, and how would you advise them what to do?
Yes, that's also what I experience with my clients and with the people that lives here around me, where I'm living here in the Netherlands, and what I experience myself, because my children grow up in the Netherlands, but we speak German, Swiss German, Italian at home, and some other languages, but these are the main ones. So they are also minority languages, and I'm experiencing it now from the other side, what it means when the children do not want to speak, respond in my language. And the advice that I give, these are just advices, and every family is different and every child is different. I have 3 children and they all respond in a very different way. So one is very, very resistant. So I have really to engage in long conversations with her before she responds then in German. Whereas the other 2 are a bit quicker. They also read in German, whereas the 3rd one not. But this is just, we are all different, and we all have different taste in everything, and also in languages. So it's not something that I have to take personally. So what I just can do for my child, and what I also advise parents to do, is to create conditions where the children are exposed to a good quality of language. And not only a good quality, but also an input that is interesting for them. Not only for us, because maybe I want them to read, I don't know, great literature, but they prefer, I don't know, cooking, yes? So I want them to explore the language or the languages from their perspective, and to form their vocabulary in the domains that they need them and where they like to explore the language in.
I think what I see here is we're talking about empathy for your children, because what they want is not what we want. It's different because they are experiencing, their peer group, there are certain things they like. When you talk about the high quality language resource, can you kind of let us know how do you define like the high quality language resource or input?
Yes, that's maybe not the right word for it, but it's something that triggers a little bit their willingness of learning. This is what I mean with high quality, but not something that stays always at the same level of language, fluency, but that triggers a little bit and makes them curious. So this is what I mean with high quality. Actually, I must say that I surrounded them with all kind of literature, everything. I mean, that can be even folders from the supermarket. Yes, or packages of food to read in 4 languages also when we went to Switzerland, and they said, oh, look, there are different languages on the package than in the Netherlands. And why so? When they were smaller, when they were younger. But so the high quality is mainly the input when we talk together. I was referring to this, not the reading necessarily, but the way that we speak with each other, so that we make sentences that they are a little bit longer, and where we repeat certain words that we see that they are struggling with. So we use them a little bit more often in different contexts, so that they can understand that a word can have different meanings in different contexts and different forms in different contexts. So this I meant with high quality or great quality.
Thank you. I think that's also kind of leading to have a household with maybe target language text field kind of environment. You want them to have accessibility, they can access to all the language, the target language, whatever language you want to focus on. Like for you, because you have multiple languages, and for a lot of my audience and listeners, I think their target language is Mandarin Chinese, because they would like to expose their kids to Chinese, or more than expose, but they would like to take it to the next level. That means when we talk about text, and I love what you just talk about even, the packages from the supermarket, cookies they like, those kind of things trigger their interest because they want to have their Oreo. So they better know, will be a good way to lead them to look into the target language. Does that count? What do you think?
Yes, that counts. And it touches a little bit, I don't know if you've heard about linguistic landscapes that you can have, that you are surrounded with if you live in that country. But if you don't live in that country like we do, so we are not surrounded outdoors in this language. Maybe we are. This is also very curious. I mean, there are restaurants that have maybe a Chinese sign or a German sign or whatever. So we can find them somewhere, or similarities with our language, where we can recognize some characters or some words that are not only in our own home, but even in our own home, if we would gather all things where our language is written on, yes, on packages, newspapers, anything that you have, products, yes, if you buy, I don't know, the computer. There is just instructions are also in other languages, and have a look at how they have been translated. Right? It's also funny to read.
Yes. Totally. That's a great example. I think we all start with something very simple. And so I think, that's why in my house, when the kids were little, I had all kinds of packages, from like cookies, wrappers, and everything was Chinese, because we do live in an environment that we don't have that, the target language we want. So I kind of collected all those things, and so kind of creating a different kind of landscape for the target language. So you see, you have like a newspapers, and some people say, why do you have all those old newspapers? No, I don't read the old newspapers. I would like to have them around. So my kids actually would circle the words they know, And then we start from like the headlines, and then to kind of figure out what the headline, what does that mean? So I think that's some kind of practice parents can do, I think in multiple languages or whatever they want to focus on. And then you also talk about literature. You said you filled the house with a lot of literature, maybe books. And that is actually one thing a lot of parents are usually struggling with teaching kids how to read. So can you give us some advice on that?
Yes, exactly. You named the word of teaching, right? It's reading and writing is something that doesn't come so natural like speaking. So it really needs to be taught. It needs to be done in a little bit more formal environment. It's not that some children, I must say, some children are very curious and they want to see what mama is writing down, and then they ask, what does this mean? So they have a natural approach, if you want, to the written word, but not all children are like that. There are others who couldn't be bothered and they don't want to see, to open a book, and maybe they follow what the parents are reading, but they have not this, this urge to learn how these signs on this paper or on the screen or wherever make sense, and that they actually have a meaning that one can read anytime he or she wants. So the approach can be very different from child to child, from family to family, but it needs some kind of guidance, that is for sure, because it's not something that comes naturally like speaking, when everything is okay, of course, with the child, if the child can hear and can actually utter and pronounce words. So that needs more guidance and actually some teaching. This is where many parents, many multilingual parents or parents who want to raise children with multiple languages become also a little bit a teacher if they want their children to also read and write.
Right.
Some parents don't want or cannot help them as much. So.
Right, and sometimes when the parents do not have the capability of that target language, I think that's how we have help from outside to come in to kind of give a boost, and also to give more input for that target language in reading. And I love what you said, especially talk about, every child is different. I think we're really talking about individualized learning and also personalized learning, because every child, they have their own unique way of learning. And just like you mentioned, some kids, they're curious, and some kids, they cannot carry, they don't really care. So I think that's when I think the materials should be catered to their interest, and that think that will be very helpful to them. My story would be, when the kids are very in the stage that they really enjoy Harry Potter, then I say, hey, there's actually something called the Monkey King in the Chinese literature. It is a different kind of a Harry Potter, and suddenly it gets really popular. I think we want them to make the connection and from one language to another language, and I think that is something very interesting. So when the kids were a little bit younger, do you find the reading aloud or read to the kids will help them to kind of build up the language kind of pre-literacy kind of stage?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so. Yes, reading a lot helps a lot for the children, not only to understand the stories, but also how stories are built up, that there is a beginning, middle part, and something is happening, and then there is an ending. So this is a very important skill that we need everywhere, in business everywhere. We need to be able to tell the stories, whereas these are fictional or not, but we need to be able to tell things in a way that is understandable for the other person. And storytelling is one nice step to get there. And there are so many stories for children, but well, one can also start with just a picture book. Yes, there are different things, and everyone focuses on something different on this picture. Yeah, is it what is happening with the bear that's interesting, or what is happening with the little boy on the bike? So it gives you a lot of different options to structure what you think is important to tell the story or to make a story out of this. So, yeah.
So now it brings another question. Some parents, they're thinking about how many words does my child need to know? So, my child has learned 100, 200, 500 words across the language. Okay, whatever target language is, 600 words. But the problem will be, is that something we should go to? Or is it something the word should have meaning, should be connecting with a conversation, with a story, so they can use the words instead of say, yes, I taught my kids 500 words. And then, but they are having they are challenged to have a conversation.
Yes. So if it's only to teach a child all the words, but the child cannot use the words, so the child is just repeating the words without putting them in connection with an object in the world or with a context, then the child will probably not use this word. So when we teach children, or when the children acquire language, it also depends on the age of the child, obviously. So if they're very young and they're still learning words, sometimes even a made-up word like bus bus that they call the dog, for example, for them it is a word. And you can understand it. It's not so necessary that the rest of the world understands what your child means when they're very young. Of course, then when they get older, you want your child to make themselves understood by others. And this increases, of course. Only if this stops, or if you have the impression that your 3-year-old child is not able to make him or herself understood by people outside of the family, and you have provided continuously input and have stimulated also the talking, then there might be a necessity to ask for help.
Yes. So now we're going into some questions that a lot of parents ask. So the first one would be, there's a parent, she talked about, like, I'm teaching my child a language that is not my native language. I have novice proficiency in the target language, but I want to make it work. What do I do?
Mm-hmm. First of all, I would ask how old the child is.
Mm-hmm. So this is like a 5-year-old child.
Okay. And what level of fluency the mother has? Is it the mother or dad?
Like a novice proficiency, so pretty much a beginner.
Pretty much beginner. So the child is 5 years old, probably in daycare or already preschool.
Right.
Yes, and the language that the person is speaking of is that language of the school or the daycare.
The language, I think she would like to add Mandarin Chinese to the language program, for her child. So she is not a native speaker of Mandarin, but she would like to introduce the language to her child. So she wants to know how would that work. And sometimes we do see parents, they do that, and then a lot of times, they hesitate because they want to know how they should proceed or to start.
How to start. I would ask also who else is there in their environment who speaks Chinese, who can help them, especially if they are beginners themselves. Because if you're a beginner yourself, you're still learning. So you need some kind of input yourself in order to then transmit it to your child. And it would be nice also to learn it alongside the child, for example. Let's say that the other parent is maybe Mandarin Chinese native speaker. To have moments where you all speak together and the partner teaches you a little bit of that language. With a 5-year-old, you can also sing songs, try to understand the songs. And the reason why I asked also what the family situation is because if the partner speaks Chinese, then the child has been exposed to Chinese already and has some kind of knowledge, and the child can help the parent who is not fluent yet. to learn a little bit. And that also boosts a bit the self-confidence of the child. To know, oh, my mom or my dad is learning with me, and Chinese is a very valuable language to learn, so and quite difficult maybe for my parent. So I can help my parent. That's also something that helps for the whole family, I must say. But what to do, yes, is to look for a community if there is some, and to try to make time to learn this language yourself. I mean, if the goal is to support the child with Mandarin Chinese, I would just start yesterday with learning as quickly as possible.
Yes, I like that. That's kind of like homeschooling. You need to be a chapter ahead. Yeah, just merely ahead of your child, and then you learn together. I think that's you bring such an important point. Like, you learn together, but at the same time, your child can show support to the parent who's also learning, and kind of make them feel very proud. They can be the teacher as well. Well, I think as a teacher, we teach and we learn at the same time, and that's a great observation. And like the parents, you know, like when my children were learning Spanish, I didn't really speak very much Spanish, but I learned a little ahead of them, and tried to help them to get on the road. And later on, I was able to have another teacher. We have a little small group, private group with another family, so we were able to kind of all put them together to learn with a native speaker, because they were younger at the time, so they were able to play and learn at the same time. And for me, you know, I would just try to keep moving forward with them, and hopefully, you know, I'm able to help them as well. So it's kind of like on different sides, you know, you speak the language as a native speaker, you teach your child your native language. It's a very different story than you are not a native speaker of a language and you want to help your child to learn that language. Do you have experience with that?
Yes, I have. I was teaching a little bit of Swiss German. I'm fluent in Swiss German, but I didn't speak it for many years. And when I saw that my children would not become that fluent in Swiss German, but it's the language of my husband's family, I just jumped in and I started speaking Swiss German with them as well. And then another time, and Swiss German is only a spoken language, it's not a written language. So I didn't have resources for that, only audiobooks, which is another thing that is very, very useful for many families, also for this person that you just mentioned. But later on, I also learned Dutch alongside my son. So when we moved to the Netherlands and he was 2.5 years old and he went to a Dutch crash, every time I asked the Leidsters, the teachers, to tell me what they were singing, what they were talking about, because he would just talk, you know, he was sitting in the back of my bike and would just sing, and I wouldn't understand half of what he was singing. So I wanted to understand what he was saying. And this made me really learn very quickly this language. And it helped very much because he wanted to share what he was learning at the daycare, what he was playing with his friends, his new friends, and I wanted to understand my son. So that was the main reason for this. But the situation that you described before, especially if Chinese is a minority language, it's very good if the one parent who is not native speaker just chimes in and helps at least for certain hours or a day in the week or every second week. There are different methods to introduce it also if it's not your native language.
Yes, yeah. So we would like to keep it, we would like to make sure you have the consistent target language input. That's what we're talking about. So you can keep it moving forward. And another question is, parents said, I can't speak the target language, so I don't know how to help my child with her schoolwork. And this child is about age 9, and the other one is age 10. So also it's another situation like parents don't speak the language, and then how do they support the child at school?
Mm-hmm. So when they are already that age, let's just say that up to then, the parent was not able to help them with homework, for example. So maybe it wasn't necessary because they were doing very well. But if the parent doesn't understand, doesn't speak the school language, they can ask the teachers for help. The first person to go to would be the teacher and asking them, listen, I don't understand much. What can you recommend? And maybe foster what the children are learning in the home language. So that the children can understand what they are doing in geography or in maths in the home language, and then it will be also consolidated in the school language, because you can actually transfer the skills that the children acquire at school or learn at school also at home. It's the same like when a child learns to read and write at school and then starts maybe to read and write in the home language. Some children start before school, but many children start only after school, after they started reading and writing at school, to learn also in the home languages. So these skills can be transferred, and maybe the child can transfer and explain to the parent, we're doing this, and the parent can try to figure out and bridge between the two. But it would be good that if the parent can also learn the school language. I would say, well, I work with many families who move very often, and where the children go to mainly international schools then, but some also to local schools. And then they say, well, they're going to the Dutch school, but well, I don't need to understand Dutch, right? And I say, no, wrong. But actually, you should understand a little bit. I would even say more than a little bit, because you want to understand the emails that you receive, all the rules and regulations from the school, the safety measurements now and the measures that are now currently shared. They are not in all languages, so you need to know a bit of the school language, also to help the child with the home language. With the home.
That is true. And then I think you're talking about like you also need to be the bridge to between your child and the school, so you will be able to kind of communicate instead of just giving everything to the school to teach your child a language. I think that is something a lot of times we kind of miss. We see that is something, there's a gap there. And I really I'm happy to hear that, you know, you think parents actually, even though their child is in for example, American school, you know, they're learning English, but they still should be involved and understand their language a little bit, so they can actually still has a bridge for the kids to come to talk to you and to kind of explain things to you and understand what the school is talking about. And then vice versa. Well, if we talk about the Chinese language, that's the same. So I think the parents' involvement is actually quite important. I believe that's also a part of your practice. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I'm very much an avid defender of the home languages, but also I bridge between home and community languages or home and school languages. So that's one thing that I always ask the parents: how well do you know the school language when you enroll your child into the school, in a given school? So, and if they enroll the children are quite young, they can almost follow them and learn the language alongside the children. Of course, if you enroll a child when the child is already 10 years old, what the requirements of the school are, of course, a little bit more demanding than a child that just starts school or just preschool. So, and accordingly, the parents should, do a little bit of work for themselves as well.
I agree. And the next question is about somebody's taking a challenging target language. I was use Mandarin as an example. So the target language Mandarin is hard. No environment for the kids. What do I do? Age 3 and 5.
Age 3 and 5.
Yes.
So no environment for the child where they're living.
Correct.
No peers who speak the language. Mm-hmm. And what about if not in-person environment? How is the online environment? I always say we need multilingual village to raise a multilingual child. So I would ask, what is your multilingual village, or what is your Chinese, in this case, village? Is there a grandma, a cousin, a sister who can provide some kind of input and stimulation for the language, even if it's online. I mean, you were saying 3 and 5 years old. Well, maybe they have Skype sessions once a week or twice a week. It's better than nothing. And if the parent is saying that the target language is hard, again, my other question is, what about the other parent? Is the other parent providing some kind of input? Can the other parent give a little bit more of input and help the parent who is struggling?
That's right.
I have more questions than answering this.
Well, I actually think like a lot of times when we ask questions, I think the parents actually can find the answers because they start to reflect like the situation they have around them. And you talk about like if the physical environment, it does not have the target language environment, how about online environment? And I think that is something we're talking about, the options, different kind of options. And also like some school libraries before, they also have like a story time in multiple languages, and that's another thing. So I personally feel with the online world, actually we have a lot of resources that we can explore. So I think maybe that's another way to kind of reach out to create an environment for the kids. Would you recommend that as well?
Yes, I would. And not only an environment for the child, but also for the parents, because the parent needs support and needs some guidance when they are looking for the right book for that age group, or what are the books that are read in other communities by children in the same age group, etc. Yes, I would say definitely that online you can find a lot, but always taking care of looking for age-appropriate input for the child, of course. But yes.
That is true. And that actually brings a very interesting topic. We actually mentioned that earlier before this conversation. There are researchers they talk about studies, they talk about like how many hours, how this percentage of a target language should have in the home environment or during the day, how many hours, what's the percentage should be, so the kid, the child can actually be fluent or getting enough input to learn a target language. Can you please touch on that? Because I think a lot of parents are very anxious about this situation. Like, well, I'm not providing 5 hours of target language to my child, or 3 hours, or not even 1 hour. They're so anxious about this. So, but you know, studies always change. What happened 10 years ago might have changed now. You know, years ago, maybe it's not a good idea to raise your child with 2 or 3 more languages, but now we think it's great, it's good. So how about for the time, the input of the target language?
Yes, it's the same with the time. There were very contradictory studies, and a few years ago, people would say yes, 30% of the time and 20% of the time. Then they were saying, well, 5 hours a week is enough. So you get completely lost in these kind of things. But in the end, what counts most is to have regular input for the child. So not only by sitting the child in front of the television and consuming, so to say, the language or whatever this is, but in engaging in conversations with the child. So really having one-on-one situations where you have a conversation about the teddy bear, about the car, about Harry Potter, whatever it is that the child is interested in and that you're talking about, or the child wants to talk about, or wants to learn, or has to learn about. So it's more about quality and really dedicating time to have a conversation and have, yes, a meaningful conversation with the child than quantity. Because what then happened with many parents, and I always ask them, write down for when they're worried if the input is enough. And I tell them, okay, what did you tell your child today? And I ask, what did you tell your child? And very often they come up, okay, put on your clothes, put on the shoes, brush your teeth, and all kind of these things. And then I say, okay, what were you talking with your child about? What was your child telling you? And then they say, I don't remember. It's very often. is this the case? It's not because they don't have, it's just not that much of time that they dedicate on really having conversations with the children. So this is something that I'm also guilty of. Yeah, I mean, every parent does this. I mean, we talk the whole day and we hope that somehow these words just stick in their brains and will come out somehow in a nice sentence at some point, but it's not working this way. So the best input is just to have these conversations with the children. And if you have more than one child, then you have to make time for each child. If it's not possible every day, then it's maybe possible every week for a certain amount of hours. And if you see that the child is using a word that you introduced 2 weeks ago, it's just something to tick off from your list and say, wow, now it's in the active vocabulary of my child now. And then you explore this and you continue, planting the seeds. So how many hours? I wouldn't say that we have to think about hours. It's about having these meaningful moments and to have them regularly. And at the end of the week, you know what you have been able to do. And maybe you say, well, this week was very busy. I was so tired. Then you make up in the weekend maybe. But it's important to do this constantly and to reassess maybe these situations.
Thank you. I think that is such a great way to lead parents to not look at the numbers of the hours, but actually the quality, the interactive time with the kids. And also because now there are a lot of streaming services, apps, and sometimes parents are thinking that, you know, if my kids can watch more shows, you know, in their target language, and maybe that will help. And I think at the same time, what we're talking about here is we encourage them to have an interactive time with them, not just a passive input, but we would like the language to be active. Can you touch on that when we talk about the passive input and then the active usage of a language?
Yes, the passive input, I mean, we've all been there, we are tired and we have to do all kind of other things. We cannot just talk all the time with our children. It would be nice, but we don't manage. I mean, I didn't manage with my children, so I think others are in the same situation. Although I talk very much, but I didn't do that. So sometimes, yes, and it is something very attractive to watch a movie and to see characters and to understand also the stories. I was talking about stories before. I mean, audio stories or videos, whatever there is that is capturing the attention of the child can be helpful if done in the correct way. Because it's if it's done just to let the child sit there and be quiet, I have my own opinion about this. I mean, everyone parents in her or his very own way, so it's not up to me to judge or to say my thing. But if you want to foster and to nurture the language skills of your child, then maybe you hear, maybe you're in the kitchen or somewhere else doing something else and you listen what your child is watching or hearing, and then afterwards you can have a conversation about this. Yes, what was the character? What was happening today to Joy? What was she eating? Would you like to eat the same thing? Should we cook this, etc.? And just pick up from what you know that your child is learning, actually, also if only passively. I don't think there is a passive learning. Actually, it's a receptive learning. Mm-hmm. But that it becomes then actively used by the child. And then you can ask also things about the language that was used. Sometimes it's slang, yeah, when you have maybe teenage children watching certain series with slang, then you say, okay, but it's also the language, so we want them to know all the different registers. So the passive or the receptive consumption of language, let's call it like this, either through movies, videos, or games, can be used actually and can be fostered if we talk about this, or if the children talk with their peers. This is also a nice thing. If they don't want to talk with us about this, I heard my children talk about all kind of characters from a series that they were watching. I lost count of these series and of everything that was happening, but they were very much talkative about this. And I said, this is also a good way to foster the language.
When kids are a little older, sometimes they have their own community and they would like to talk to their friends. So if they have friends, they use that target language. I think that will be very helpful as well. And then we probably just want to see if we can also learn about that. keep update with all the kids, everything up to date. The kids know, we would like to know as well, so we can have the conversation. And I think one thing you talk about is like, have a conversation with the kids and then be able to talk about it and then kind of circle the key words or expressions or words you have taught them 2 weeks ago. I think it, for younger kids it's a little bit different than the older kids, but I definitely feel like the interactive conversation is always very important. And after you have the movie night, and maybe you can have a conversation about the movie in the target language. That will be something very helpful as well. Mm-hmm. And then coming to the one very last question about like, so one parent would like to know that my child always replies to me in the community language. Okay, that's a common situation we hear from parents. My child always replies to me in the community language. What should I do? The age of the child is 3.5 years old.
Mm-hmm. So my question would be, again, if the child always replies only in the community language, and when this child started replying in the community language. It can be, for example, that the child started because he or she started to go to the daycare or the preschool then, or when the children are older, or school. Because when this happens, the school language or the daycare language becomes the most dominant language in the life of the child. And this is just a fact. Fact is that some children then struggle with switching back to the home language because maybe they are tired. It depends also when the child is not responding in the language, like I said just before. If it's because they just came back from the daycare and is still in the daycare mode, or the child doesn't have the words in the home language in order to have this conversation with the mom or the dad. Because maybe the thing that the child wants to share is in the daycare or the community language, and we have to bridge between the community language and the home language and give the child the necessary vocabulary to be able to talk about this. And by modeling, for example, this is one of the strategies to help a child to switch to the home language, is to model what the child is saying. And this is again a reason why the parents should be able to understand the child. So if the community language or the daycare language is different from the home language and the parent is not fluent yet or not fluent enough in it, it's good to learn it in order to help the child make him or herself understood in the home language as well. So if the child comes home and talks about the Romans, then you can help them and give the same vocabulary in your home language and form the sentence that they were just saying. For example, in English, you say it in Mandarin. And then the second sentence comes, and then maybe 2 or 3 words are repeated several times. Then you see, okay, my child is struggling with these 2 or 3 words. I'm giving them to my child. And after a few turns, maybe the child is using them. And then you have reached the target. But it depends on so many factors. Maybe, yes, the child is tired or doesn't want to speak for other reasons, because maybe his friend who doesn't understand Mandarin is just sitting next to him. But most of the time it is because our children do not know the words yet. And they are struggling a little bit to tell the story in a coherent way in our home language. And this is where we can support them without pressuring them too much, but by giving them the words and the forms and being patient. It's the only thing, at least for me and for the people I helped. This was the key.
What a great and valuable word you just mentioned, patience. Be patient. I think that is definitely a key, because language learning is not from day one and then you jump to 20 years later, because I think language is always evolving. Even for me, I'm still learning. I believe you probably experience the same thing, because we if we are language learners, I think we always learn, not because we started. That means we keep going. So thank you for sharing such a valuable word with us and with the parents as well. Patience. So please be patient. And also, I have a story to share. And because you brought up that such a wonderful, vivid point about most of the time a child is not speaking with you in the minority language or the target language because this child does not have the base knowledge or expressions he or she needs to express himself. I have a story that's about my son. When he was younger, he was talking to my sister on the phone, and he was using as much Chinese as possible, but that day he was using a lot of English. So he was asked, why are you using English? And then he replied, because mom didn't teach me all those words. So the story was, my son literally told my sister that because mom has never taught me how to say those things in Chinese. It has something to do with the planets or physics. It's something at that time he was very interested in. And that was very stunning for my sister to hear that. And then I have to jump in and say, yes, I have never really touched on those things. And that also inspired me to know that, I should also include all those literatures, books about whatever he has interested in. I should include all that in our home library. So we actually later on, we kind of bought a lot of books about dinosaurs and planets and science, all the things about the nature. So he is able to read with me about all those topics. So he will have the expressions, the words he needs in order to talk to other people.
Yes. Yes, it's a very important point there, because many parents think that, well, when you start and the child is 3 years old or 4 years old and then starts going to school, then the teachers will do the rest. But actually it will not happen this way. We have to, although I know not every parent can be a teacher, but if we want to transmit our language or make sure that our children keep up with the home languages very often, and maybe read and write, we have to give them the input and give them the context. And context is books, it's videos, it's all kind of things that are related with what they are learning in the world, not only at school, but also in the world. Maybe they have a hobby that they're talking about all very often, and we don't know all these technicalities and how they are called. And so I think it's actually not only about language, right? It's really about knowing our child and being interested and staying interested in these beautiful creatures that we have.
I think language is about life. It's about every day. So a lot of times parents say, well, my child's language skill is right here in the kitchen, food. That's because that's the only thing you talk about. So if we, as parents, we can explain the topics that we're talking about with our children and expand our outreach to whatever our children are interested in, I think we actually can flourish, can grow the language in their life. Because after all, learning a language is actually a family lifestyle. If we think it's a family lifestyle, I believe that's something we can carry on for a long time.
Oh yes, I like this family lifestyle. It's a multilingual family lifestyle. I like this.
Surely it is. So Ute, it is so wonderful to have you join us, sharing such wonderful insights about raising bilingual children and also some questions that parents have. So how do parents find you so they can join you to have your insights from time to time? And I know you also have a YouTube channel, and also you have Multilingual Family Facebook group. Would you like to share some of the places that the parents can find you?
Yes, so you mentioned it already. So it's I have a YouTube channel that's called Ute's International Lounge, where I also have a section for multilingual families, which is also the name of one of my Facebook groups. So Multilingual Families, people can join and we have discussions there. There are experts of all kind of backgrounds and a lot of parents who are raising their children with multiple languages. Then I have another Facebook group, Ute's International Lounge. I have a website, Ute's International Lounge, where I also share the adverts about upcoming events. And they can also write me an email directly.
Fabulous. We'll have include all that in the show note and also in the information section. So we're going to play a game now. So is there a Chinese word or expression you would like to know before you go?
Yes, I would like to know how to say enjoy your languages.
Wow, enjoy your languages. That's a beautiful expression. So in Mandarin, we say 享受你的语言。享受你的语言。
享受你的语言。
Beautiful. 享受你的语言. Well, you speak so many languages, so I'm going to take a challenge. To say something simple like 享受, maybe that's something manageable. Like enjoy.
That enjoy. In German, it is genießen.
Genießen.
Yes. Do you want another language?
Sure, let's try it.
Okay, a very similar one, that's Dutch. It's genieten.
Genieten.
Yes. Or Italian, we have a nice word that's godere.
Godere.
Good, yes. Or in French, prendre plaisir.
Prendre plaisir.
Oui. Or in Spanish, it's the disfrutar.
Disfrutar.
Disfrutar, yes.
Disfrutar. Wow. Mm-hmm. Do we have more?
Yeah.
Oh.
Swiss German would be kniesisch.
Good. Oh, say one more time.
Kniesse.
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 Kniesse. Oh.
You enjoy is kniesisch.
Kniesisch. Beautiful. See, this is the fun thing about learning a language. And then you just like, oh, is there more? I would like to try a little bit more. I think the thing about learning a language is you got to make mistakes.
Oh, yes.
And laugh.
Yes.
And I think that's the only way we can move forward. And then actually having fun. I think that's very important.
Yes.
And thank you very much, Dr. Limacher. And really wonderful to have you join us today. And anything you want to tell the parents before you go?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It was really very, very fun. I really enjoyed every single moment. And what I can say to the parents is to follow the lead of the child and to never give up and enjoy speaking the languages. And like you just said, having fun doing it, because this fun is contagious and it makes us more curious and not taking everything so seriously. That helps as well. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, let's relax and have fun. Thank you so much and hope we can have you back next time. Thank you. 谢谢.
谢谢.